Yael Scherer is the head of Israel Survivors of Sexual Violence Advocacy Group. Thank you so much for joining me here at the Media Line, and I'm sure many would hope that your organization didn't exist. So many women are distraught over what happened on October 7th. The violence, the rape, the attacks against women, not only women, men as well. And I want to begin, Yael, with what have you heard? What have you witnessed?
Well, aside from heading this organization, I'm also an expert on health policy, emergency care, forensic evidence, and rape kits. And so very soon after the attack on October 7th, I contacted and was contacted by professionals in my field from the health ministry, from the police, from the National Forensics Institution here in Israel. And very soon after the attack, a matter of days, it was already beginning to surface, and we understood that this is an event like no other. We've never, ever had such violence in this region, such cruelty, abuse of bodies, and also we've never had such widespread accounts of sexual violence and rape, both towards women and men.
Yeah, so many people are now involved. You know, the police claiming that they have testimonies, at least 1,500, Zaka the same, close to it. They were there that day where they really had to not just deal with over 1,000 bodies, but try to understand what was the story for each individual if they were able to. Tell me, with all of this information, why it took so long to get out the fact that women were raped, men were sexually abused as well. Why was this something that just took that kind of time so the world would understand this played a role in the terror that Hamas brought on to the Israelis that day?
First of all, we wanted to be sure that this is actually what we're seeing is actually what we're seeing, because this never happened in this region, in this conflict, in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, was never a part of it. Unlike other conflicts in the world where sexual assaults and rape were on both parts, here it didn't happen. And this conflict was a very violent one for decades, but never have we seen such accounts. This issue is taboo. So even towards the Israeli public, the government was very alarmed by these reports, wanted to check them, and wasn't even sure how to convey it to the Israeli public. Nonetheless, to the international community, we had to be very careful about these accounts, because these were people where their families might still be alive. The footage that Hamas took is just horrible. People saw their relatives being killed, being abused, being kidnapped. We have footage that Hamas uploaded to social media. And Israel was very, very careful with collecting everything in order to say that this was a widespread phenomenon. Even in Israel, we had a hard time even coming to terms with saying it, because it's so taboo, and nobody wanted to disgrace the dead, and nobody wanted to say something that would hurt the families.
Take Naama Levy. Here is a 19-year-old young woman who was dragged by her hair by Hamas terrorists onto a truck. You see her bloody pants. The surmise, of course, that this woman was raped. There were many stories. Witnesses who said there were gang rapes. How many of these testimonies have come to your attention on a personal basis? And what role have you been playing directly or indirectly?
I don't want to comment about specific people or cases since the police investigation is still going on. I'm not at liberty to say things that are part of the police investigation. I don't want to hurt the criminal case against terrorists. And I'm also not somebody that investigates themselves. It's not part of my job. What I do deals with policy, with the counseling, therapy, treatment of the victims. And because of that, I have a lot of information that was supplied to me by the Israeli government. I don't want to disclose things that might breach on somebody's personal information or privacy. So I wanna help you, but I don't want to comment on specific people, testimonies, or names, because this is a very, very touchy subject. We do have living survivors of both genders, and I want to protect them. I want to respect the dead. I want to respect their families. So I can't specifically comment on cases.
Yeah, Elle, I totally respect what you're saying, and I'm sure many that are viewing this will say the same. Why is it that it takes horror after horror, story after story, and the bloodier and the gorier they are, then people might understand something of this nature happen and in such a large manner?
I think it's just because people perceive this conflict as a bloody conflict for many years. And so they really don't realize that what happened here in the beginning of October is so outrageous, horrible. They do perceive it as a conflict where people killed each other before. So this might not be as out of the ordinary, I don't want to say, because it happened before. No, it never happened before. Never have we seen such cruelty. Never have we seen people burned alive like this, people abused like this. We've never, ever seen mutilation of bodies in such a way. You would need to be a psychopath to do things to bodies. I mean, in an ethnic conflict, in a war, you kill people and they're dead. You don't do that to people's bodies. You don't stream it on live media. You don't upload it to people's personal users from their own phone. You don't do things like that. This was a step up. It's something that was imported into this conflict from other conflicts. It never happened here before. It's more reminiscent of al-Qaida, chopping off people's heads like this. It's more reminiscent of ISIS and raping women like this. It's foreign to us. Foreign. Burning people alive, kidnapping babies and toddlers, shooting people's pets, pet dogs. If this is an ethnic conflict and a war, then you wouldn't shoot people's pets. This was done to terrorize and to scare people, and this was a deliberate act of cruelty, and it was made public. And because it was so disrespectful of the victims, so disgusting, then the counteract was to not talk about it and first of all respect these people, not publish the videos and the pictures in an outrageous way, and trying to be respectful and mindful of these people's dignity, their families that are still alive, and being respectful of the people who survived and are still living and need to live with what Hamas has done to them. And they're not living somewhere else in a vacuum. They read the paper and they go online like everybody else. People were murdered in front of them. They were raped. All of their community is dead. Their house might have been burnt down. They have a lot to handle, and they are not willing to come publicly now and be interviewed by journalists. And it's not fair to expect that of them.
But you are a voice on their behalf. And what's
I
important,
protect their privacy at all costs. And I think we should all be very mindful that this process of healing, of recuperating, of maybe returning to some sort of normal life, is going to take time. This is something that nobody's handled before. We've reached out to the world to ask how to handle babies in captivity. We have no knowledge in Israel on how to treat trauma of captivity by terrorists at 3, 4.
and yet there are still 2 babies right now from the Bibas family in Gaza. And it's a deep worry for Israel and the Israeli people at the moment. And one can't even imagine having a 10-month-old and a 4-year-old still in captivity at this time. Yael, I need to ask you a little bit about the men. You have brought up the issue that it wasn't just women. And
Yes.
I think it's important to share that, because it's also the issue that I want to ask you is why we don't see more men speaking out on behalf of women that have been raped. One of the questions that many are asking as journalists is, where are the women's voices, as well as myself? But I'm also asking, where are the men's voices too?
I don't expect anybody's voice anymore. I'm so disappointed with the international figures, with the international bodies and institutions. I can't believe that this has been taken so lightly, that it's taken 2 months for somebody to say that this is not okay, what happened here, to even try to understand how shocked and horrified we are about what we've found in these rural communities, in these villages, in these farms. Why does it take so long to say that it's not okay? This was a holy day, Simchat Torah, and on Shabbat, on a Saturday, 6:30 in the morning, people are asleep with their toddlers, people are in their beds. And this attack was vicious. It was directed at Jewish people, was directed at Arab people, Muslim people, Bedouin people were killed here. Even if Hamas knew that they were speaking Arabic, that they're Muslim, they spoke to them, they filmed them being shot. So they knew that these were not Jewish people. They invaded the student body and killed foreign students from Nepal. Why? They absolutely knew that these were students that came here to Israel to study agriculture. This was a building that housed foreign students. These were not Israelis that have nothing to do with the conflict here. They were all shot. Young men, 20-something men that came here to learn about agriculture. What for? Why would you shoot Nepalese people? Why would you kidnap people from Thailand and the Philippines? Why? What for? And the amount of the atrocities and cruelty that happened here, it never happened in this region and this conflict before. Never.
Is there anything that you saw as a weave with all the people that are suffering that you've encountered and that you are comfortable saying? I'm not trying to,
What do you mean as a weave?
There was a commonality of the outcome. Because again,
I can say that I saw very specific and different behaviors at certain crime scenes and sites. So I do suspect, from what I've seen and heard, that we've had leaders conducting certain behaviors with their terrorist group unit that was specific to them. And I think it's going to be important to the court cases. So we did see behaviors specific to certain sites. So that leads me to believe we've had people from Hamas conducting themselves in a certain way during the attack. But we did see specific things. Ofakim and Sderot had a different kind of behavior, of pattern of the units of Hamas than what happened in Nova Music Festival. We saw specific behaviors there and very different to the villages. So I suspect certain peoples did certain things a lot of times, if that makes sense.
it does. I wish it didn't, but it does. You yourself have spent time both in Tanzania and in parts of Africa dealing with human rights violations, and as a journalist for the Ynet Group. Have you ever come in contact with anything of this nature?
I was advising on the Ukraine, and this was just a year ago, and we didn't have reports of things like this. We had a lot of reports on rape, but nothing like this. Nothing. I was also in Tanzania and other parts of Africa where there's conflict and there's refugees from parts of Africa that still have civil war and attacks from terror organizations. There was numerous accounts of rape, numerous accounts, a lot of rape, but I've yet to have reports anywhere close to what happened here, disgracing bodies like this, shooting off people's genitalia, cutting off people's. Never encountered such reports, not in Europe, in all the conflicts, not in 94, the Balkans. Haven't heard such reports, not like this, and not in Africa.
What is it going to take to get the world to come out in force?
I don't think it's going to happen.
Is the world without principles?
I don't know. I'm telling you, this what happened here in my profession, in all the years I've been doing policy to do with the emergency care of rape victims, forensic evidence collecting, rape kits, never had anything remotely close to what happened here. And I don't know if it's principle. I don't know if it's. I just am very disappointed by the international communities, bodies, committees, the UN. I think the United Nations have behaved. I don't know how to describe it. I really don't. I think that people really abandoned us. We still have people kidnapped in Gaza now, young women and men at the beginning of their lives, an 11-month-old baby, a 4-year-old, taken from their home in the early hours of the morning, dragged into Gaza. I'm just very disappointed.
You yourself were a victim of sexual abuse as a younger woman. In looking back and having to get through that, get past that, and because you went through it yourself, do you feel that enables you to be able to help the others that are going through these very hard times right now?
I suffered sexual violence from my father as a young girl. And because of it, I'm in this field. And for me, what's the most important thing? The most important thing is to have policy that allows these people to have lives, to have families, to go and study at the university, to keep going. And I'll make sure the Israeli government, state bodies, parliament, whatever it takes, that this is not forgotten, that this doesn't happen again to anybody, whether they're Israeli, Jewish, Muslim, come from Thailand or the Philippines or Nepal. And I'm going to keep fighting it.
I can't imagine that you won't be spending a lot of time for many months with each one of the people that you're involved with, or each one of the group working with you involved with people who've been through this. I can't even begin to imagine.
I really thank you for your empathy, because this is going to be, I mean, I've been in this field for 11 years. This is going to be the field from now on. This is going to be my field from now on, collecting of forensics evidence. There's not going to be a convention, a day that we don't do this for the next 50 years. I understand that this is something that is going to change Israeli culture and the Israeli state forever. Forever.
I think nobody has come to terms with it. And I ask the question, because I am making statements here, but I ask the question as a journalist, as a woman, how do you explain it? How do you share that story in history? How do you make sure it doesn't happen?
I really don't have answers myself. It's only been 2 months. I think personally I've not come to terms with it, with what I've heard, with what I've seen, with people I work with who had to deal with this, who held my hand and cried on my shoulder. It's only been 2 months. I don't think I myself am still coping with it. That's the truth.
If you had one plea to the world right now, Yael, what would it be?
Don't let this happen again. Once it enters a conflict, rolling it back is going to be impossible. This is now going to be the standard here with attacks. I'm so very scared of the future.
Yael Scherer, who is the head of a very important organization, Israel Survivors of Sexual Violence Advocacy Group. I wish you a lot of courage and strength, and I really hope that women of the world and men of the world come forward with voice at this time. Thank you for sharing with the Media Line.
Thank you. Thank you for this interview and for your sensitivity.